Sign these divorce papers, my husband declared, his voice unfeeling and cold. I stood frozen, struggling to understand his sudden decision. How could he believe his mother's twisted lies over me? He cast me aside without hesitation, choosing her words over mine. I felt a sense of betrayal that cut deep, mixed with disbelief that the man I once loved had so easily turned against me. The home we shared, once filled with memories and laughter, had become a battleground. My heart ached, not only for myself, but for our children, who watched this cruel spectacle unfold. What was he thinking, pushing us out, leaving us with nowhere to go? Yet, standing there, I knew one thing. I wouldn't let this betrayal define us. Gathering my strength, I looked him in the eye and told him I wouldn't sign. He could push me to the edge, but I would protect my children and find a new happiness, no matter how impossible it seemed in that moment. As I held my children close, a wave of determination surged within me. We would find a way forward. This wouldn't be the end, it was just the beginning. My name is Jody, and life hasn't been kind. Years before, I had been through loss when my first husband died shortly after the birth of our second daughter. Alone and grieving, I struggled to keep our family together. Both of my parents were gone, and my world had shrunk to the small house he left behind, and the loving support of my uncle and his wife, who lived nearby. They had no children of their own and raised me like a daughter. They took me under their wing, helping me through the darkest days. Financially, things were tight, and my uncle suggested I work at his small manufacturing company. Sewing was my passion, and I hoped to someday turn it into an income stream for my daughters. But the pain of my husband's loss was fresh, and each day was a battle to stay strong for my children. In that challenging time, I had no idea that life would soon lead me to another man, Ned, who would bring more conflict and heartbreak. My hope for a family was reignited then. But looking back, I realize it was only the calm before a much darker storm. I met Ned through my uncle's company. Ned was a mid-career hire, having transferred after an uncomfortable situation in his last job where he had gone through a messy divorce. He was polite, hardworking, and attentive, a gentleman in every sense. He seemed to understand the struggles of single parenthood, and his calm nature felt like the stability I desperately needed. We shared many quiet conversations at work, and in time, I found myself drawn to him. Despite the sadness that had shadowed my life, Ned brought a glimmer of hope. He showed genuine interest in my children, going out of his way to make them laugh and smile. The children began to look forward to his visits, and for the first time in years, I imagined a future that felt warm and complete. Though I was cautious, Ned's kindness and gentle approach gradually broke through my walls. He was an escape from the grief that had weighed me down for so long. Little did I know that the man who appeared so caring and sincere would become the source of my deepest betrayal. For now, though, he was the light in a dark world. Encouraged by my uncle, I allowed myself to fall for Ned. With his gentle nature and dedication to the children, he seemed like the answer to my prayers. After much contemplation, I agreed to remarry, feeling that a father figure could only bring good things to my children. My uncle and his wife supported my decision and even agreed to witness our wedding, although we chose not to hold a ceremony. Since Ned and I had both been married before, we wanted something private and low-key. He moved into my home, the one I shared with my late husband, and our new life began. I offered to sell the house and start fresh, but Ned assured me it wasn't necessary. He said the children were already comfortable here, and a change wasn't needed. I appreciated his thoughtfulness at the time, but in hindsight, I wonder if his motives were less noble. For a while, things were peaceful, and I felt that my children had a stable family life again. Yet, the honeymoon period was short-lived. Just as I started to feel settled, his mother's shadow began creeping into our lives, disrupting the harmony I had tried so hard to build. One evening, out of the blue, Ned announced, "My mother will be moving in with us." I was taken aback, as we had never discussed this. I asked him to explain, but he brushed off my concerns, saying there was a spare room and it was only natural for his mother to live with her son. I felt cornered. We had met his mother only once, briefly, and I barely knew her. Ned's devotion to her was unmistakable, almost worshipful, and I worried about how it would affect our household. He accused me of lacking compassion for an aging woman who would be left alone otherwise, pushing me to agree without fully understanding the impact. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping that she and I would learn to get along. But a part of me sensed the intrusion into our lives would bring complications. His mother arrived soon after, with her belongings and an air of entitlement that set the tone for our new living arrangement. From the moment she walked through the door, I felt a shift in the dynamics of our family, as though my place had suddenly become precarious. My instincts warned me of the storm brewing ahead. Living with Ned's mother quickly became a test of endurance. She criticized my parenting, my housekeeping, even the meals I prepared. "Why are the children so cold towards me?" she would complain, blaming me for their natural shyness towards someone they barely knew. She never lifted a finger to help with household chores, leaving me to manage everything while working full-time. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, each day piled up with her complaints echoing in the background. She also seemed to ignore any boundaries, taking over common spaces and filling them with her presence. The children felt uncomfortable, clinging to me whenever she was around, and I couldn't blame them. I tried to speak to Ned about sharing household responsibilities, but he was oblivious, defending his mother at every turn. He dismissed my concerns, saying she deserved a break after all she'd sacrificed. I felt isolated, like a stranger in my own home. The house I once saw as a sanctuary became a prison of resentment, with every attempt at compromise ending in frustration. Her presence began to wear me down, and each day I grew more aware of how little support I could expect from my husband. With Ned's mother came a financial burden that slowly began to drown us. She spent lavishly, without regard for the cost. I tried to bring up the growing expenses, especially the rising utility bills due to her extensive use of heating, air conditioning, and long showers. Ned brushed off my concerns, dismissing them as trivial. "She raised me alone and deserves comfort," he'd say, as though my efforts to save meant nothing. I felt a deepening resentment, knowing that while I worked hard to maintain our home, she contributed nothing but complaints. My requests for basic budgeting were ignored, and any attempt to set limits was met with hostility. Soon, it wasn't just our finances that were strained, but my patience as well. I wondered how long I could keep up with the demands of both work and home, all while feeling unheard and unsupported. The weight of Ned's unyielding loyalty to his mother pressed down on me, leaving me feeling helpless. Each ignored conversation further eroded my trust in him, and I began to question how much more I could take before something had to give. One night, things came to a head. Ned accused me of forbidding his mother from using electricity and water freely, claiming she had been left trembling in a cold, dark room. I was shocked. His mother had twisted my polite request for moderation into a story of abuse, painting me as a villain in her son's eyes. Ned believed her without question, and no amount of explanation could convince him otherwise. As he berated me, accusing me of cruelty, I felt a new kind of heartbreak, a loss of respect and understanding that I could never regain. My pleas for reason fell on deaf ears. I realized then that his loyalty to her would always eclipse any commitment he had to me. For the first time, I felt trapped in a marriage where my voice didn't matter. In that moment, I understood how little control I had in this life we had built. The woman I had tried to make peace with had succeeded in turning my husband against me, leaving me with nowhere to turn. All the strength I had gathered over the years felt shattered, leaving me vulnerable and alone. Things took an even darker turn when Ned locked me and the children out of the house. It was a bitterly cold night, and we were left standing in nothing but thin layers, the winter air biting at our skin. I tried to reason with him, but he slammed the door, shouting that we needed to cool off and think about our behavior. I was stunned. How had it come to this? Desperate, I gathered the children close and walked through the snow to my uncle's house. By the time we arrived, our fingers were numb, and my heart was heavy with despair. My uncle and aunt took us in without hesitation, offering warmth and comfort. As I shared my ordeal, my uncle's expression darkened. He had suspected something was wrong and reassured me that I wasn't alone. We stayed there that night, safe from the storm that had overtaken our lives. As I held my children, I knew I couldn't return to the life I'd been living. Something had to change. I wouldn't let my children grow up in a home where their mother's voice was silenced. The next morning, my uncle and I discussed our next steps. He revealed something I hadn't known. Our marriage certificate had never been filed. In all the chaos of blending our lives, Ned had neglected the formalities, leaving our marriage legally incomplete. My uncle had held back from filing it after hearing rumors about Ned, hoping to protect me from any future fallout. This revelation shocked me, but it also offered a glimmer of hope. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront Ned, knowing I had the upper hand. I would reclaim my home and the life my children deserved. With my uncle by my side, I returned to the house to face Ned one last time. He tried to hand me divorce papers, taunting me with the idea of being a twice-divorced woman with nowhere to turn. But I met his arrogance with a cold truth. We were never married. His smug expression faltered, and for the first time, he realized the power he thought he held over me was gone. I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in years, ready to close this chapter for good. As my uncle revealed the truth, Ned was left speechless, his confidence shattered. My uncle, the man who had supported me through everything, stood firm, ensuring that I reclaimed my home. He exposed Ned's deceitful intentions, making it clear that he would no longer be welcome in my life or my children's. With the support of my family, I was able to remove Ned and his mother from our home, ending the toxic influence that had nearly destroyed us. I watched them leave, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. They moved into a small rental, facing a difficult life ahead. Ned lost his job and struggled to keep up with financial obligations, while his mother continued her extravagant ways. I, however, felt a renewed strength. With each step they took away from my life, I found myself reclaiming pieces of myself I had lost. My home was mine again, a safe haven for my children. The nightmare was over, and I was free to build a future without fear or compromise. It was time to rediscover who I was and embrace the life I had fought so hard to protect. With Ned and his mother gone, I began rebuilding my life. I quit my job and pursued my dream of designing children's clothing, pouring my love and creativity into each piece. Supported by my uncle, I set up a small business, showcasing my handmade clothes at local events and online. The work was fulfilling, and I felt a sense of pride that had long been missing. My children thrived in the newfound peace of our home, no longer afraid of conflicts or whispered accusations. Each day I grew more confident, cherishing the simple moments that I had once taken for granted. The house, once a symbol of loss, now radiated warmth and security. My children's laughter filled the air, reminding me of why I had fought so hard to keep this life intact. The journey had been difficult, marked by betrayal and heartache, but I emerged stronger, more resilient, and ready to face whatever lay ahead. In the end, I had found my own happiness, not because of anyone else, but because I had the courage to protect the life I deserved.